Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are here with the Trinus and a bunch of prints that were printed on the Trinus. The Trinus was sent to me by Kodama for the purpose of review. So if you are interested in seeing my thoughts on this printer, then keep watching. This video is brought to you by my awesome sponsors over at Patreon. I could not do videos like this without your support, and it means the absolute world to me that you guys would be willing to support me. This printer is sold as a kit, which means you are going to have to put it together. I will link to the video where I put the Trinus together up here and also down in the description box below. So if you are interested in seeing it and how it got put together, then go check that video out. To give you an idea, there are 37 screws and most of it is modular, so it's a very easy to build machine. There was no complications at all. It took me about 45 minutes of taking my time to put the printer together, and it did print really well the very first print out. And the very first print was this one right here. And I will zoom in on this so that you can see. I was thoroughly impressed. This was printed at a 0.1 millimeter layer height, and it looks flawless. The printer itself has a 120 by 125 by 125 build volume, the 120 being the X, the other two are 125. I haven't noticed any problems with getting that full build volume. There has been some adjusting that needed to happen to make sure that it was optimized to get the full build volume, but I was able to. Both of these prints are printed at the full height, 125 millimeters, and that was the big test I really wanted to find out. Could I get the full height? When you order it, like I said before, it is a printer kit, which means you will have to put it together. The electronics are all pretty much already put together for you. All you have to do is plug things in. So you have to plug in the Z motors, you have to plug in the end stops, things like that all have to be plugged in. But the wiring itself is done for you. The cable management for the most part is done for you as well. The printer as the base model does come with a SD card reader up on top. There is also a port for you to use a USB plug, and it does come with a USB plug included. Also included are going to be some wire cutters, as well as a couple of Allen wrenches and a pair of tweezers. All of these come in handy when getting your prints going and when putting the printer together. I do like these Allen wrenches because they are the ball tip, which means it's a whole lot easier to put the Trinus together. And I've found myself using these on all of the printers rather than the ones that came in their kits, because the ball tip is just way easier to use. So in terms of the printer coming with everything it needs, it definitely does. Now you can opt to have filament added to your order. Mine came with 2 spools and a box of samples. The 2 spools were the aluminum PLA, this is by Kodama themselves, and then also some of the Kodama Blue, which is Poly Plus from Polymaker. And both of them printed amazingly well. It took me a little while to dial in the settings on the Polymaker, but once I did, everything printed really, really great. And I did use the aluminum for the spool holder because I thought that would be kind of a nice addition. Now the spool holder is another thing to mention. It does not come included with the Trinus, and there are a couple of versions that Kodama includes on an SD card that you can, or for download off their website, that you can print. However, I didn't really like the layout of any of the ones that they had. I will link to the spool holder below. Thank you to Joe, the 3D Maker Noob, for pointing this one out to me. It is super, super sturdy, and it just works really well. I haven't noticed any additional wobbling or anything like that because it is such a robust spool holder. It's totally over-engineered, but the whole printer is a little over-engineered, which is not necessarily a bad thing. The LCD screen is not standard. I did select that as an option when Kodama offered to send me this. And do I feel like it's necessary? Not necessarily. It does make it easier to kind of find your proper Z height, because it's easier to move the Z axis up and down using that than it is connected to a computer. But do I really think it's needed? No. If you want to print directly from an SD card onto the printer without an LCD screen, you're just going to create a file called auto print, and it is going to print as soon as you plug it into the printer. So in terms of temperature adjustment, yes, the LCD screen does work quite well, unless you're using the Pango slicing software that is included with the Trinus. I am not a huge fan of the Pango software. It does serve its purpose, but I am a much bigger fan of using Cura instead. If you are looking for a free slicer, or if you already have Simplify 3D, that works really well also. There's nothing particularly wrong with the Pango software. I just wasn't a fan of the rafts. I wasn't a fan of the supports, and there were certain things that I sliced in that just didn't turn out quite as good as when I sliced it in Cura. So I would definitely recommend checking that out if you haven't. The Trinus Facebook page does have a lot of suggestions on how to optimize your Cura profile for the Trinus. Let me know in the comments below, or tweet me on Twitter and I will go ahead and send you over all of my settings. The Trinus did come with two different build plates for me. It came with an acrylic version and a plastic version. I like the acrylic version much more. As I stated in my previous video, all of them are scored with a grid. The grid on the black plastic is much deeper grooved than the grid on the acrylic. And the acrylic is non-flexing, which means that when you screw it in nice and tight, it does not warp or bend. This one, on the other hand, it has a little flex to it, which does help remove prints from the print bed. However, if you tighten too much, you will end up with a print bed that is warping, and that is exactly what happened. I will zoom in on this build plate for you so you can see that my print actually did dig into the plate a little bit, and I do have some scarring now on this bed. It also does not come with a way to level the bed. This is my biggest complaint about this printer, is the bed leveling, and beds themselves are not quite, the whole printer seems over-engineered, and these two seem very under-engineered. I did a previous video on how you can level the bed using a couple of springs that you would pick up at a hardware store, or possibly using a couple of springs from inside a ballpoint pen. However, it does work, but if you're printing on with painter's tape down because you don't want the grid lines on the bottom of your print and you don't want to print with a raft, you have to remove the tape every time you want to tighten down some screws. And that to me is not very effective or efficient. Since I created that video, Kodama did come out with a bed leveling system that does make it a little more like the A-net that's behind me. That is only $20, so I have actually ordered one of those, and I have also ordered their heated bed system, because I feel like those are the two things that are stopping me from using this printer as more of a go-to printer. I get more frustrated with the bed adhesion issues or with leveling issues than I have with anything else. The printer itself prints absolutely amazing. As you can see from the prints here, it is a super, super dialed in printer. I did not do any real adjusting on anything other than, you know, your temperature settings and some retraction settings. That's it. And a couple of these were printed using Pango, a couple of these were printed using Cura, and a couple of these were printed using Simplify 3D. And all three options ended with great success. So the price has gone up a little bit since I did my last video. It was originally $349. It has since gone up to $379. However, Kodama was nice enough to give me a coupon code to pass on to you guys, which is Abuzz Designs, all one word. I will put it right here across the screen and down in the description box below if you guys are interested in buying this printer. Now, one of the cool things I think does happen with this printer is you can add or subtract things as you want. If you're going to be printing in ABS, they do offer an enclosure, an all aluminum enclosure. Again, as I said earlier, the LCD screen is not standard. It is an option that you can add on if you feel like it's necessary. And they also give you an option for a way to attach the LCD screen to the enclosure or to the printer itself. In addition to that, you can get a heated bed. You can get the bed leveling system. You can get a laser attachment to create a laser engraver, among other items. If you're interested, definitely check out their website below. There are a ton of different things that you can add on to this printer. And one thing that I recommend everybody who gets this printer gets, and that is the silicone sock that they have created custom fit for the Trinus itself. Now, the reason you might need a silicone sock is if you have a ton of thermal runaway. Now, on this printer, I have video and I'll try to import it here so you can see. The printer was set at 230 or 240, depending on what I was printing at the time. I can't remember. But the temperature was at that temperature and dropped down to down below 200 at the beginning of a print. And it took a good couple of hours for it to regain all the way back up to temperature that it was supposed to be at. Now, obviously, if that happens, you are going to have problems with your print. And in some cases, your print may fail due to the plastic not melting enough to actually extrude. Luckily, that wasn't the case for me. But I did have to cancel a couple of prints because of this issue. Now, putting on the silicone sock changed everything. That seriously made me enjoy using this printer again. Before, it was becoming super frustrating because I knew that this was becoming a problem, and I tried. Some people said that it was the fan being too powerful. I would drop the fan down to 10% and the same thing was still happening. So it wasn't just the fan. Some people said that the power supply wasn't strong enough. Kodama has since offered a stronger power supply online. So if you would like to upgrade your power supply, they do have that as another option. When Michael over at Kodama sent me the silicone sock, everything changed. I went from getting frustrated because my print was not, the first couple of layers were not looking the way that I wanted them to suddenly everything was printing perfectly. And it went from dropping 30 to 40 degrees to dropping 2 degrees and recovering within seconds rather than within hours. So if it wasn't for that, I don't know if I would be giving this printer as high of a review as I currently am. The other thing that I wanted to address is the noise level of this printer. Now, when I received it, it seemed super noisy, and I did add some lube to all of the threaded rods, which definitely helped reduce the noise level. And then I also took a piece of the packing foam from the printer itself and used that as a base for the printer to sit on. That also helped drastically with the sound. Is it a quiet printer? No. Is it super loud? I wouldn't say that either. It was originally, but I definitely wouldn't say that now, especially with the lubricated rods as well as the foam that it's sitting on top of. It's an average level. I wouldn't say it's much noisier than the Flash Forge at this point. Couple of things that I would have liked to have seen Kodama do. One is to send out build tack with every single printer. They send out build tack if you order the heated bed. And it's got a nice little Kodama logo on it, and it's custom fit for this size of the build volume. I almost feel like they should send that with every single printer. They sell them for a 2-pack for $10, and I almost think for $5, just throw it in with the printer. It would, I think, make a lot of people's printing experience, like mine, for example, a lot better. Because printing on the grid, for those of us who don't want to print on a raft every single time, can get a little frustrating. I was able to do a whole lot using painter's tape, and it worked great for me. As you can see, there is still painter's tape on this. There is also a piece of glass on the bed. I have been able to get a couple of prints printed using glass. However, without the heat below it, I have found that there is a little bit more warping that happens on this, and that could be because of an unlevel bed. I have found though that the acrylic bed needs less leveling than the black one, like I said previously. So let's talk about some prints and what I thought about how the printer handled them. For starters, let's talk about this, and I think I talked about this in my Maker Geeks Geek Box review, because this was in their Battleship Gray Raptor PLA. Now, my nephew, who is 3, designed this with me in Tinkercad, and I decided to print it out on the Trinus, and I did that because almost the entire thing was full of supports, and I wanted to see how the Trinus did with supports. Overall, it did a pretty good job. The underneath section where the supports look horrible. They look just horrible. But looking at the printer, or at the print head on, it doesn't look too bad. When I was trying to figure out the settings on the Polymaker Poly Plus, I had a lot of stringing, which was a little bit of a problem. I did not want to print this in base mode. I wanted it a couple of layers thick to help make it a little more rigid. And the print itself looks great until you look on the inside, and there is a ton of stringing. Also, the bottom, and I will zoom in on this, you can see where the grid is. Now, this was printed directly on this with no painter's tape or anything down. So that will give you an idea of what the base would look like. It doesn't bother me, but on the black bed, it was almost unusable. One of these towers for the spool holder was printed on top of this, and then I broke it. So then I printed the other one on this, and there's a huge difference in the texture of the bottom because these grooves are so much deeper. So the printer itself did a really great job with a lot of these things. I did have some temperature issues with this one. This is where I first noticed the huge drop in temperature while I was printing. So you definitely had some layer issues where the shine disappeared, and you can see some definite ridging in this one. So that was something to point out. I did print this little guy right here. This is the chip model from Chaos Cortec. I printed this sliced in Simplify 3D, and it printed out awesome. This does have supports that go all the way around the entire top, as well as underneath the nose here, and it printed so well, and the support issue kind of disappeared using Simplify 3D. The quality on this print looks awesome. I need to finish him up and paint him so that I can compare my actual chip mug from Disney World to this little chip cup right here. The biggest surprise that I had was printing this little torture test. Now, this is the torture test from Polymaker, and it is printed in the Poly Alchemy Elixir in the color Emerald City. And this printed incredibly well. There's a couple of little retraction dots that I have since been working on getting rid of. There's a tiny little bit of droop on one of the bridges, but overall, and the tiniest bit of stringing, but overall, this sucker printed so well. I will link to this model and many of these other ones in the description box below, so that you can go ahead and test them out and print them yourself. Again, my only complaint is the first layer of some of these prints leaves a little bit to be desired, partially because of the build plate that you have and partially because of the leveling issue. So like I said, I did order the leveling system and the heated bed, as well as a couple of additional silicone socks, and I will be getting those shortly. And as soon as I do, I will definitely give you guys a rundown of my thoughts on them. But as a general review of the Trinus, my overall thoughts is that for the price, it is a great printer. Keep in mind the build volume is smaller at the 120 by 125 by 125. And it is a kit. Like I said, it's a fairly easy kit to use and to assemble, and the printer itself has done great things for me out of the box with very little tinkering. So if you are going to get this printer, my couple of recommendations for you would be this. Make sure to get a silicone sock. It's definitely worth the upgrade. I've heard some people didn't have a problem with the thermal runaway, but I definitely had a huge issue with it. So better safe than sorry. Save yourself the frustration and spend the $9 on the 2 silicone socks. I would highly recommend getting the build tax for it if you don't want to get the heated bed. I think that had I used a separate or a different kind of bed, I probably wouldn't have been as frustrated with the first layer issues. I would have still had the issues with the leveling, but I wouldn't have necessarily had the first layers not looking quite as nice as I would have liked. I have heard on the Facebook group that there have been people who've had issues with the ticket process through Kodama. Now, I haven't had to put in any tickets. When I had the problem with the cord, they sent me out a cord immediately. And when I broke the bed, they replaced my bed immediately. So I don't know if... I don't personally have any experience with their ticket process or how long it will take. If you have any questions for me, go ahead and leave them in the comments below and I will try to get to them as quickly as I can. If you do have any questions about any of these prints, let me know that. That's really all I have for you guys today. I hope you have an awesome rest of your week and I will see you guys again next time.